Have you ever been jamming with your mates at a jam night or over a backing track and really struggled to work out what key you're in and what scales to play? This can be really frustrating and, let's be honest, feel slightly embarrassing if you start improvising in the wrong key. If this all sounds a bit too familiar, then stay tuned because this video is for you. Hello and welcome back to Sax Wizard. My name's Michael and my aim on this channel is to help you become the best sax player that you can possibly be. Today's video is actually inspired by a comment that I had on a recent video. The comment is from Eleanor Snyder. Can you explain how to know what key you're in or what pentatonic or blues scale to play? For years, I've never figured that out. If you go to a jam session, how do you know what scale to play? So thank you, Eleanor, for the question. These types of comments are really useful for new video ideas. The question is around how to work out what the home key is using your ears and also what scales to play once you've figured out the key. Obviously, we're assuming that we don't have any sheet music or written chords and that we can't just ask the keys player or guitar player what chords they're playing. I think we also have to assume that the music stays in one key and doesn't change. Start by listening carefully to the backing track or the jam band. This process is all about using your ears. Next, play a random note on the saxophone, say C natural, and we're going to hold this note for a few seconds. Now, chances are the first note that you play isn't going to sound very nice. It could clash horribly with the underlying chords. From here, we're going to slowly play up the chromatic scale, holding each note for a few seconds. We should eventually hit a note that sort of sounds right, and this is where your ears come into play. We're aiming for the tonic or the root note. This note should sound resolved. It should sound like you've reached your destination and it's not leading on to another note. There will be multiple other notes in the scale that sound nice when you hold them, like some of the chord tones, but the root note should hopefully have that resolved sound to it. We might hit the root note straight away, or we might have to play up quite a large chunk of the chromatic scale before we hit it. It's going to be completely random depending on what key you're in and what note you start on. Here's an example of me playing up and down the chromatic scale until I hit the root note. I'm using a section from just the two of us as the backing track. If you've never done this before, then it might take you a few tries to start with. You might find yourself playing up and down the chromatic scale a couple of times before you find that magic note that sounds right. If you're struggling, just slow everything down and hold each note for quite some time before you move on to the next note in the chromatic scale. If you want to practice, you can turn this process into an exercise. Just keep picking random songs as backing tracks and see how quickly you can work out the root note. Once you've worked out the root note, you'll need to work out if it's a major or minor key. So let's say we landed on the note G and it sounds nice and resolved. Start by playing the G major scale. If this sounds right, then your home key is G major. Okay, so as I've just demonstrated, if G major doesn't sound right, then try playing your G minor scale instead. Okay, great. So we've just worked out that our home key is G minor. Our G minor scale was sounding like a good fit over the backing track there. If you tried both major and minor scales and neither of them sound right, then you've most likely picked the wrong note as your root note. Sometimes you'll think you've landed on the root note, but in fact you've landed on one of the other chord tones like the third or maybe the fifth. In this scenario, you'll need to go back to the drawing board and start playing up and down your chromatic scale again. With practice, you'll get quicker and quicker at doing this. When you've had some practice and trained your ears a bit, you should be able to spot that root note in a matter of seconds. Finally, we want to know what are the best scales to play. So we decided that the G major scale sounded right. This would mean that we can play any G major scale, including the standard 7-note G major scale, G major pentatonic, and maybe some more advanced scales like the G major bebop scale. We would also be able to play any minor scale that's in the relative minor. The relative minor of G major is E minor, so we would also be able to play a variety of different E minor scales, including the standard E minor scale, E Dorian, E minor pentatonic, and E minor blues scale. If instead we decided that the G minor scale sounded right, like in the example of just the two of us, then we would go through the same process but work out the relative major instead. So in this instance, we can play a variety of G minor scales and B flat major scales, B flat major being the relative major of G minor. Here's an example of me demonstrating playing a few different scales over the backing track, which we now know is in G minor. It isn't completely necessary to work out the relative major or minor, but it just gives us a few more options to use when we're improvising. And having these extra options means that we can create more colourful and interesting solos. Okay, so to finish, I'll demonstrate the whole process from start to finish, again using just the two of us as a backing track. If you did find the video useful today, please remember to smash that like button and also think about subscribing to the channel so you don't miss any of my new videos. Thanks for watching, see you next time.